keep us apart. I can see us crying tears of joy, and all I can say is, boy, oh boy, I'm so happy to be holding in my arms, in my arms, in my arms, with you at last, in my arms. I'm so happy to be holding you in my arms.
Okay, good morning and welcome to Fire First. You're with Claire and Robbie, and we've got some very special guests in the studio today. They're all from Forgotten Australians. We've got Wendy, Jenny and Gabby. Thank you very much for coming in. And I know, Gabby, you've come down from Brisbane, and was that was for the rally on Saturday, I believe?
Yeah, I'm an ex-Victorian. Oh, yes, I'm an ex-Victorian.
Okay, and
ex-Mexican.
Thank you very much for joining us. Grego is here as well, who's been a supporter for the Forgotten Australians and the rally on the weekend. Could you give us an idea of who Forgotten Australians is and what the rally was aiming at?
Well, what we want is the government... Sorry. Go on.
Okay, the Forgotten Australians, as children, were brought up in institutions and orphanages, non-religious homes and Catholic homes from the beginning of the 19th century right through to the 1970s. We were abused physically, emotionally, physically, and we're rallying to get redress in Victoria for the injustices that were done to us while in care.
And can I read this?
Yeah, we've got here the text. It's a text of the apology from Kevin Rudd.
Kevin Rudd apology, just in case there are a lot of Forgotten Australians out there who never knew about the apology and didn't hear the apology. Okay, this is motion of apology to the Forgotten Australians and former child migrants, 16th of November 2009. Today, the Government of Australia will move the following motion of apology in the Parliament of Australia. We come together today to deal with an ugly chapter in our nation's history, and we come together today to offer our nation's apology, to say to you, the Forgotten Australians and those who were sent to our shores as children without your consent, that we are sorry. Sorry that as children you were taken from your families and placed in institutions where so often you were abused. Sorry for the physical suffering, the emotional starvation and the cold absence of love, of tenderness, of care. Sorry for the tragedy of the childhoods lost, childhood spent in austere and authoritarian places where names were replaced by numbers, spontaneous play for regimented routine, the joy of learning by the repetitive drudgery of menial work. Sorry for all these injustices to you as children who were placed in our care. As a nation, we must now reflect on those who did not receive proper care. We look back with shame that many of you were left cold, hungry and alone, and with nowhere to hide and nobody to turn to. We look back with shame that many of these little ones who were entrusted to institutions and foster homes instead were abused physically, humiliated, cruelly and violated sexually. We look back with shame at how those with power were allowed to abuse those who had none, and how then, as if this was not injury enough, you were left ill-prepared for life outside, left to fend for yourselves, often unable to read or write, to struggle alone with no friends and no family. For these failures to offer proper care to the powerless, the voiceless and the most vulnerable, we say sorry. We reflect today on the families who were ripped apart simply because they had fallen on hard times brought about by illness, by death and by poverty. Some simply left destitute when fathers, damaged by war, could no longer cope. Again, we say sorry for the extended families you never knew. We acknowledge the particular pain of children shipped to Australia as child migrants, robbed of your families, robbed of your homeland, regarded not as innocent children, but regarded instead as a source of child labour. We acknowledge to those of you who were told you were orphans, brought here without your parents' knowledge or consent. We acknowledge the lies you were told, the lies told to your mothers and fathers, and the pain these lies have caused for a lifetime. To those of you separated on the dockside from your brothers and sisters, taken alone and unprotected to the most remote parts of a foreign land, we acknowledge today the laws of your nation failed you, and for this we are deeply sorry. We think also today of all the families of these forgotten Australians and former child migrants who are still grieving, families who were reunited, families who were never reconciled, families who were lost to one forever. We reflect too on the burden that is still carried by your own children, your grandchildren, your husbands, your wives, your partners, your friends. We thank them for the faith, the love and the depth of commitment that has helped see you through the valley of tears that was not of your making. And we reflect with you as well in sad remembrance on those who simply could not cope and who took their own lives in absolute despair. We recognise the pain you have suffered, pain so personal, pain so profoundly disabling. So let us therefore together as a nation allow this apology to begin healing this pain. Healing the pain felt by so many of the 500,000 of our fellow forgotten Australians and those who as children were in our care. And let us also resolve this day that this national apology becomes a turning point in our nation's story, a turning point for shattered lives, a turning point for governments at all levels and every political colour and hue to do all in our power to let this not happen again. For the protection of children is a sacred duty of us all. This is the motion that later this day this government will commend to the House.
Thank you, and that was in 2009.
Yeah, that's a copy of the apology that Kevin Rudd gave. But what he didn't do was state the extent of the abuse and torture. But Wendy, do you want to...
Yeah, I just want to say something about because I was talking to my friends last night about the prevalence of child abuse in this country. It's just phenomenal, you know, like you're talking to people, you know, who have hidden this most of their lives, but you scratch the surface, it's all coming out, and there's just
and it's still
so
happening
many
today.
people.
And we who are young children that went through it, we are the ones that are trying to protect the children today by telling our stories to the Protection of Children inquiry just recently and doing all our submissions into the sexual abuse that is on at the moment regarding the Catholic churches because a lot of forgotten Australians were in these Catholic homes.
But see, this is why we want a royal commission, because if the people from the past are held accountable, that will make the people of today with children in their care think twice, because one day they're going to think, oh, this child's going to come back for me. You see, so it's for the past and it's also for today and the future for children.
I think it's also important to recognise this inquiry, parliamentary inquiry, is. I believe it's going to be a whitewash,
Yes,
but also
exactly.
it's not just about an inquiry into the abuse in the church organisations, but also non-government organisations.
Yes.
And look, there's an epidemic of abuse going on, and whether it's sexual, whether it's violence in all its forms. And look, we're demanding a Royal Commission into this, and we have to stop this epidemic of abuse. A lot of these people that raped and pillaged these children in understate care are still in positions of authority. Hardly any of them have been charged. The police in Victoria have sat upon their hands with a lot of this stuff. It's fine for Commissioner Ken Lay, to come out and say, look, the church has been aiding and abetting and covering up all these these episodes of abuse and violence. But look, also Victorian police are complicit. Why were they sitting on their hands for so long? You know, my view is that Ken Lay's only come out and done that to try to shore up his position. But look, I believe the Victorian police were complicit in a lot of this, and certainly you look at the horrific situation in Ballarat where over 40 people died, and their deaths are totally attributable to the sexual abuse by some of the Christian brothers out there. And that was going on in Ballarat. 40 deaths of young people, premature deaths that we know about. And then there's a whole other number of people that obviously don't come forward because of all the other stuff. So Wise Up Victoria demand a Royal Commission into this stuff?
Well, like I said on Facebook the other day, all the police have to do is go back to the newspapers to find out where the churches have moved the priests to.
Well, they kept moving them on from parish to parish.
Yeah, well, they moved one on about 5 years ago to Healesville from Melbourne.
And they've
So all they've got
moved them
to do
overseas too.
Yeah, I mean, all they've got to do is just go back through the papers, go back through the archives, and they'll find them all.
So, again, we're talking about the Forgotten Australians, and that refers to children who were placed in custody outside of their family home during the 20th century. And we're talking to Wendy, Gabby and Jenny. Can you tell us a bit more about what you thought was missing from the apology? You've mentioned that there was a huge amount of abuse and mistreatment of children in care. Is that something you wanted to...
Yeah, the criminal offences that were done to these children in care was sexual abuse, floggings and beatings with belts, canes, 3-foot-yard rulers, electricity cords and their woolen dustpan broom handles, hairbrushes, heads slammed against walls, heads being slammed together, heads being held underwater until you passed out. If you were a bedwetter, you would have your wet sheets rubbed in your face, which often ended up in nosebleeds. You were dragged along the floor by our hair. We were made to at night before going to bed to line up outside the dormitories and show our underwear, holding to see if the nuns could smell. Smell, and even if there was the tiniest stain, we would have to stand or kneel with facing the wall, hands on our heads. Sometime it would be early hours in the morning, while the nuns sat there and said their rosary. And if we dare moved or looked sideways, we would cop it with a stick across the back, the head or the legs. We're lobbying here, both federal and state governments, for a royal commission into the sexual abuse, emotional, the criminal, the torture children suffered in these church and non-government organisations, run homes, orphanages and foster care. The term Forgotten Australian refers to children who were placed in the custody outside of their own family during the 20th century.
Yeah, and that also included lots and lots of Aboriginal people.
Yeah, yes,
and you are all in homes.
Stolen
with them.
migrants, stolen gen and Forgotten Australians were all in the institutions together.
With an Indigenous person from the home once. We hitchhiked to Swan Hill.
Good on you, Jenny, because they wouldn't have likely given you an excursion to Swan Hill.
Oh, never. No.
We might have got there for different reasons, but once we were in there, we were all treated with the same abuse. It didn't matter.
I think one of the amazing stories that I heard, and look, that was so well spoken what you just said, but certainly at the rally on Saturday, one of the Forgotten Australians talking about the first time she got to eat fruit was at 16-year-old after she was let out of state care because they were all abandoned out once they turned 16 generally, and she got a job, and actually that was the first time she'd ever eaten a piece of fruit. 16. I think she was in a Salvation Army home, and that is just frightening. But look, I just want to say you guys are absolutely inspiring in what you're doing, the courage you're having in speaking up, because so many of the Forgotten Australians were denied the right to an education. They're denied the right to health. They carry huge amounts of trauma because none of this was addressed. They're denied the right to psychological services or any of those things. And now we find that their children are also experiencing trauma because of the generational and intergenerational trauma that's been inflicted by agents of the state. This should never happen. This is just one of the crimes of the 20th century, what it's done to these 500,000 people under state care.
See, they have said sorry, but still no accountability.
It's
like
word.
You can't just drive, knock somebody over, get out, say sorry, and then drive on. This is exactly what they've done.
We can't move on. These issues have to be redressed. And I just want to make a quote that I spoke to a mothercraft nurse who used to be at Broadmeadows Babies Home. And I spoke to her yesterday and I asked her what did she think of her time as a mothercraft nurse. And her quote was, "As a mothercraft nurse who worked in the system, these places were a cold, harsh, sterile environment, loveless, and no one cared."
Exactly.
Yeah, I was just when I was looking at the Aboriginal stolen generation, before they said sorry, they said you won't be getting compensation.
Yes, and they did the
They
same
made that
to us
clear.
in
And
Canberra.
they said, sorry, now get over it.
Yes.
Move on. You know, it's the way that we was treated. And most of these kids who left these places, they were thrown out of these places at the end of the day, and they landed in the Aboriginal community without resources we had. We couldn't deal with the problems they had. And that became a huge burden on our communities. You know, we were spending all our time trying to deal with the issues of these kids that had been stolen, you know, and no help from the government whatsoever. They created the situation, and it all got thrown onto our struggling communities at that time with no support. So I can hear what you're saying.
It was really interesting on Saturday. We actually emailed every elected state and federal member in Victoria, and only one member of the Victorian Parliament actually came to, and that's Colleen Hartland.
So
from,
thank you to Colleen
Western
Hartland from the Greens.
From our hearts, we
Yep.
say a big thank you.
And also gave us a write-up in their newspaper. So
that was in the Green Weekly, Green Left Weekly. So,
So we do have some angels on our side.
Yeah.
Some
And also-
politicians are good.
Look, also we have to thank Stephen Jolly from the Socialist Party, that Steve did apologise for not attending, and certainly is absolutely throwing his weight behind this campaign run by the Forgotten Australians.
Yes.
And look, Steve's an amazing guy, and he is he's an elected councillor, not at the City of Yarra, and we wish Steve every success in his re-election campaign for the City of Yarra too, because certainly Steve stands strong on the public housing issue, and so many Forgotten Australians live in poverty, below the poverty line, and their housing is now the ones who have gained housing in the public in public housing. It's now under threat. Where a tenure is going to be limited, it seems, by the Baillieu government. So, good on you, Steve Jolly. Keep up your amazing work, and also Colleen Hartland. Thanks so much. For your
We do
support.
appreciate it.
Did want to mention one thing. When Kevin Wright, the Prime Minister at the time, apologised to the Forgotten Australians, he also said that as adults we are going to be classified as special needs in the medical profession and that, and to go into nursing homes, it's just something we can't even think about after how we were treated as children. So when the federal government says we're going to have to be classified as special needs, they've done nothing about it since.
It's not happening.
It's not happening. Nothing's come from the apology into fruition, and things are being done.
You see, a lot of the disabilities that Forgotten Australians have today, it's not from old age. It's from what happened to them in the homes. And a lot of them have carried that ever since they left the homes, not been able to become productive members of the workforce. So that's why they've remained in this poverty. So they've had a lifelong time of poverty, and the government still nothing. You know, they virtually not just stole their childhoods, but their adulthood as well, you know.
So what are we going to do about
Well,
this
that's what we're
situation?
lobbying for adequate services, Royal Commission, redress. Because at the moment, we've got, in Victoria, open place. Now, they were allotted $2 million a year. $1 million of that goes into cars, rent, wages. $1 million has to go amongst 50,000, at least 50, probably more, but I'm just using that as a minimum. That has to go spread amongst 50,000 Forgotten Australians a year. I worked that out to, at the most, $20 for each individual Forgotten Australian.
A year.
Yeah, for all the abuse, the suffering that so many have gone through, $20 a year.
What do you think, Gabby, about certainly so many of you violated by either NGOs or church-run institutions. But then we look at a lot of the services you're supposed to access to address some of these issues that you've got from these these forms of abuse. What do you think of that most of the primary care services are actually run by church-run organisations?
They are.
And I've heard stories of people actually going to places like Flagstaff Crisis Accommodation run by the Salvation Army, and actually seeing the person that hideously violated them as a child actually
Banging into
dishing out
their
the
old
services.
abuser.
So, do you reckon this has got anything to do with the huge amount of forgotten Australians and people of stolen generations that choose to sleep out in the streets rather than having to access church-run crisis accommodation or services?
I don't blame them. I'd stay on the street.
You find that a lot of the forgotten Australians, from when they got out of the home and thrown out in society, we lived on the fringe of society because we didn't trust anybody. We'd never go back into the government or churches or anyone and ask for help because we were so poorly let down when we were little children. So we don't trust anybody. And it's like forgotten Australians just trying to go into places like Open Place and that to try to get their state records. Suddenly the records don't exist because if whatever's on that record might be something that they can use in a legal technicality. So why give the paperwork to us to then be used against them?
Wayne Simmons on the steps of Parliament House was talking about you really weren't identified by the name in any of these homes or you actually had a number which he
Yes.
compared to very much
Either
similar
that
to
or
the
last names.
plight of the Jewish people in Germany.
Yes, actually, at the National Museum, when they opened the exhibition at the National Museum in Canberra, Gabby and I got to go to that opening up there, and we got a bed sheet to represent the bedwetting of the sheets. And I came up with the slogan that said, the only difference between the Jews and the forgotten Australians was our wardship number wasn't tattooed on our arm. We went through all the medical experiments. Mount Eliza Medical Research Centre used to do all these experiments on the babies and the children. And they even admitted that when they failed in the lab animals, they still proceeded to give the children these experiments. Herpes was for polio, influenza, all because we were behind the walls, the 10-foot high walls, and no one out there on the other side of that wall in society knew what was going behind these 10-foot high walls where these babies and children were.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight,
Forgotten.
out of mind, forgotten.
Can you mention about the parading of you guys and, to appease the public, dressing you up in clothes for the media opportunities and then taking them off? What?
The beds,
Yeah,
Gabby.
what would happen, the nun would come into the classroom because many of us didn't go to outside schools until we were 12, 13. So we were taught by the nuns that looked after us. Now, they'd come in and they'd say your name, Philip, Salter, whatever, get upstairs and change the canopanes and put the dolls on the bed. So we knew, someone's coming. So we'd go up, put the change the canopanes, put the pretty little dolls on the bed, and then probably about 2 hours later, they'd say, right, Philip, Salter, whoever, get back up and change the canopanes back. So we'd have to go up and change everything. So when this is just my opinion, I think I've worked out that they may well have been welfare officers. We don't really know who came there to check up to see how we were because they weren't family. So they obviously walked away thinking, this is a lovely place. Oh, how nice.
They've been taken care of.
Yeah.
So
Now, and you mentioned that Victoria was quite a long way behind the other states in the in the treatment. Or redress
Victoria has no
forgotten
redress.
Australians.
New South Wales has no redress.
and that's because
But
they had
Queensland
the most
have
kitchen
it. Tasmania have got it. South Australia, Western Australia. But in even those states, they didn't cover the thousands. There's still thousands coming out of the woodwork who have never received any redress, knew nothing about it.
And
So
there
the
was
government
cut-off
did a
point
quickie.
in a 2-year period. Like if, Gabby's known about this for 10 years. I only found out the day of the federal apology and managed to get up there to be in the Great Hall that day. But yeah, they seem, it's sort of like open place. People have gone in that knew about the federal apology. Now other people that are finding out, they've got nothing out of it except to apply for their wardship file.
Well, I found somebody on Facebook a couple of weeks ago when she was actually looking at our rally site, and she said, Jenny, I don't know if I am a forgotten Australian. She says, I was raised in foster care, but I lost my files. And I said to her, well, go and get them again. And she said, but can I? And I said, yeah. I said, they are your files. They only send you copies of stuff. They never, ever send you a complete file.
But they'll also give you blank pieces of paper.
Oh, yeah, I got
it's all the
pieces of paper from my
information
sisters.
that's taken out, but you'll have a red stamp on it that says freedom of information.
Sounds
And
like
there's
the
nothing
ASIO
there.
files.
Exactly.
Oh, mine's about
Oh,
this.
they're probably watching us.
Well, lest we forget anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Our people have been through this,
Yeah,
and
yes.
it's just exactly the same. And it's about these authorities oppressing people and using them and abusing them. It's been going on since day one of Australia's history. So, good luck to your mob, and whatever we can do in terms of our radio support, you're most welcome, mate.
Here's the thought for the day. Just try to imagine a 10-foot high fence like a prison with a huge concrete slab with all these little babies and children, and there was not a doll, a pram or anything that these little children could actually hold and love.
And hello to all our forgotten Australian brothers and sisters out there. Love yous.
We love yous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that was Wendy, Gabby and Jenny from the Forgotten Australians. Thank you very much, Greg. Greg Oak, for your support and for organising today's
thanks
today's
very
visit.
much.
So thank you very much for coming
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna play a song for you. I hope it doesn't upset you too much.
No. we'll be
Hello,
fine.
this is Archie Rose,
I
and
like
you're
music.
listening to good music on 855 AM.
It heals the
3CR.
soul, music. And the emotion.
This story's right, this story's true. I would not tell lies to you, like the promises they did not keep, and how they fenced us in like sheep. Said to us, come take our hand, set us up on mission land, taught us to read, to write and pray. Then they took the children away, took the children away, the children away. Snatched from their mother's breast, said this is for the best, took them away. Welfare and the police came, said you've got to understand, we'll give to them what you can't give. Teach them how to really live. Teach them how to live, they said. Humiliated them instead. Taught them that and taught them this, and others taught them prejudice. You took the children away, the children away, breaking our mother's heart, carrying us all about, took them away. One dark day on Framingham came and didn't give a damn. My mother cried, go get their dad. He came running, fighting mad. Mother's tears were falling down. Dad shaped up and stood his ground. He said, you touch my kids and you fight me. Then they took the stronger family, took us away. They took us away. Snatched from our mother's breast, said this is for the best, took us away. of home. Told us what to do and say, taught us all the white man's way. Then they split us up again and gave us gifts to ease the pain. Sent us off to foster homes. As we grew up, we felt alone, 'cause we were acting white, yet feeling black. One sweet day, all the children came back. The children came back. The children came back. Back where their hearts grow strong, back where they all belong. The children came back. Said the children came back. The children came back. Back where they understand, back to their mother's land. The children came back. Back to their mother, back to their father, back to their sister, back to their brother, back to their people, back to their land. All the children came back. The children came back. The children came back. Yes, I came back.